Can you be a copywriter if you suck at writing? I have a feeling that my answer is going to surprise you. I expect you're going to think one of two things. You either think I'm going to say, sure, you can be a crappy writer and still be a copywriter, all under the guise of keep watching my videos and buy my course. Or you think I'm going to say, obviously you have to be a good writer to be a copywriter. But I hate to break it to you, it's not that simple. It's actually a much more nuanced answer, and I want to dig into this because it's a question I'm asked all the time. By the way, I'm Sarah Turner. I'm a freelance medical copywriter, copywriting mentor, and this is something that people are always asking me, as I mentioned. But the thing is copywriting is so different from most of the writing that we were taught growing up. And I mean the writing that we were taught in school. And that's the thing. So many people came out of school thinking, okay, I didn't do great at writing essays. I didn't really enjoy writing essays. And therefore, there's no way I could be a copywriter or make a living as a writer. But that is just simply not the case. Copywriting is far more about persuasion and connection and empathy. And when done well, you really connect with the reader. So if you are really good at convincing your friends to kind of see your point of view or come along to your side when you're trying to convince everybody where to go for dinner, that is the kind of thinking that really lends to being a good copywriter. And it's so much more important than being a good speller or knowing really good grammar. In fact, it's very funny to me. I often get people commenting on ads and on things that I write online, telling me that the grammar is not perfect, and yet that ad goes on to earn millions of dollars. And that's because copywriting is writing how people speak. It's not about formal English classroom writing. I cannot say that enough. And so all the people hardcore about grammar out there, I hate to break it to you, it's not that important in the world of marketing. It might be great for essays or research materials, but it's just simply not the most important thing when it comes to writing copy. In fact, most people who come through my program have to unlearn their formal tendencies. In fact, when I have conversations with people who are thinking about becoming a copywriter and they tell me, oh, I went to school for journalism or I have, my master's in English, I usually am like, you know what? You're probably going to have to unlearn some of your formal tendencies. And they're shocked to hear that. I was one of those people. My background was in research, and so when I first started writing copy, it was so boring. Honestly, I feel bad for the people I made sit through reading my first drafts of my very first pieces of copy. They were not good. They were dry. They were written like an essay. They built a case and then tried to present a conclusion. But quite frankly, nobody's got time for that. And it's honestly not the thing that connects the most. The thing that connects with people is storytelling and imagery and connecting using the, proper lingo, making sure that you're showing the reader that you get it, that you're on their team. That is the kind of stuff that is super powerful in copywriting. And so many people who were not classical writers in school turn out to be excellent copywriters because they're good communicators, because they're persuasive. I like to joke that we all have a little bit of a copywriter in us. Remember when you were a kid and you knew which parent to go to for whatever it was you were going to ask for? I don't know about you, but I knew exactly which parent to ask and how to ask for the thing that I was hoping to get, Hey dad, any chance I can go out with my friends and watch the movies? I'm going to be back on time. I'm going to use my own money. I knew those were the things that were important to him. And so I knew how to speak to his values in order to be more likely to get that yes. I'm sure you know what that feels like. We all do to some extent. And that is so much more what copywriting is than writing a formal essay. So if you are wondering whether or not you could be a good copywriter, even if you weren't the best academic writer, these are the questions you have to ask yourself. Are you good at communicating? Do you enjoy texting with your friends? Are you good at getting people to see your point of view in an argument? Are you good at getting people to kind of come around to your side of things? That, my friend, is what copywriting is. And so even if you weren't great at writing in school, you can still be an excellent copywriter. I'm going to share a story about one of the very first students that came through Write Your Way to Freedom, my copywriting program. So she was a nurse and she had really only had experience writing for school and nursing projects, and it was her least favorite part of what she did. But she was so drawn to the idea of being able to work from anywhere in the world that she decided to give copywriting a go. And she was shocked to discover that she really enjoyed it because of its laid-back nature. She was able to quit her job in 3 months, and now she lives in the Caribbean sailing. Actually, she has a sailing business with her partner, and she has never looked back to the traditional 9-to-5 world. So if you have this belief that you couldn't be a copywriter because you weren't good at writing in school, I want to challenge you to consider the questions I asked you today and maybe push back on that. Now, alternatively, it is important to remember that you do have to be able to string a sentence or two together. You need to be able to have some basics. You know what I mean? You have to be able to communicate effectively, not have a ton of spelling errors and things like that. But you do not need to be the best speller by any means. In fact, I'm not a great speller. In fact, sometimes, and I've gotten kind of lazy on typing, sometimes the spell check is literally like, I have no idea what you mean, because I'll type in the first 2 letters and then just kind of like smash the keyboard for the rest. But I have a really good vocabulary. Just because I'm not a great speller and I don't have the best grammar definitely does not mean that I am not an effective copywriter. Again, because it's so much more about logic and reasoning and psychology. So again, you have to be able to write to some extent. Like, it's not one or the other. I want to make sure to drive that home. And now for the people who have English degrees who get all up in arms when I say things like this, it's really important to point out that, it makes sense that you'd be up in arms about this because you spent a lot of time and money and energy on your degree. And I'm kind of saying that it wasn't 100% necessary to be a successful writer. And it's a fact. Look around. There is so many examples of writers, authors, journalists, copywriters who have gone on to be ultra successful. But here's the thing. Instead of getting up in arms about that or being frustrated or mad, it's actually a good thing. This is actually leveling the playing ground for the world, for people to have access to opportunities. I often joke that the internet is kind of like the great equalizer, right? It's providing more opportunities to people who couldn't afford a degree. And quite frankly, I am all about that because I think we all deserve to have more access to opportunities, even if we weren't raised in a way where we had access to some of these highly privileged opportunities. So I had to throw that in there. Now there's a couple of other thoughts I want to leave you with before we wrap up. First things first, here are some of the common fears people have when they tend to think that they're not the best writer and they're considering becoming a copywriter. Well, the first one I addressed. It's not like writing an essay, so if you weren't great at writing an essays in school, then don't worry about it. Seriously. In fact, it might work against you. The second one is you don't have to be an expert at spelling and grammar. I am 100% not one of those people, and quite frankly, language changes and it grows, and that's something that I find really exciting about language. Third, if English is not your first language and you're interested in being a copywriter, I have seen many copywriters succeed where it wasn't their first language. What did they have to do to make that happen? First, they had to make sure that they had a native speaking editor. That's super important. Second, you needed to make sure that you really understand the psychology of it all. And understanding the psychology behind copywriting is not something that only happens in English. I mean, there's copywriting in all sorts of languages, right? It just happens to be that English-speaking markets are some of the biggest markets. So even if English isn't your first language, as long as you have a pretty decent understanding of it and you would have to ask someone to specifically look at your writing to make that call, I would definitely ask for an outside opinion. It doesn't mean that it's not an option for you. I've seen many people make it work. Another concern that people often have is that they're not fast at typing. I am also one of those people. Fortunately, there are so many wonderful voice dictation tools today, and I love using them, especially because the most effective copy sounds like you talking to your friend. And so when we tend to sit down and actually type things out, or at least this is 100% true for me, I tend to somehow start getting more formal in my writing. So sometimes I like to use voice dictation because I'm not a fast typer, but because it also gets me to write as I speak. And that is so much more effective. The next thing that people worry about is writer's block. And this is an interesting one that I have a lot of beliefs on. In fact, I have another video on this specifically. But sometimes giving it a name and giving it power is kind of what creates the problem in the first place. And when you're a copywriter, you have a client that you're writing for. So it's very rare that you're actually going to experience writer's block because you're never usually starting with a blank canvas. You usually have a task or something that you're trying to communicate or put out into the world. And that really, really helps with that. The other thing that I love about copywriting as a career for myself personally is it's made me a better writer because ultimately it's easy to write when you're feeling inspired, but it requires you relying on your skill set to write when you're not so inspired. So when you can push through those moments of lower inspiration, and that's what I tend to call writer's block because I don't like to give it too much power, then you are really going to develop your skills as a writer and not just rely on that inspiration. So that's something that I think is worth pushing back on. It's something that is worth pushing back on in all sorts of creative endeavors, right? All that resistance that can come from when you do a creative activity. The other thing I want to reiterate one more time is, again, you do not need an English degree. And quite frankly, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we're moving away from needing college degrees in general as a society because we have the internet. And we no longer need to invest tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars into something that is ultimately creating an incredible amount of painful debt in our country. You know, it's a big topic of conversation right now. And for a lot of degrees, it's quite frankly not necessary to be successful. I'm a big believer in mentorship where you get real life experience and you actually get to earn money as you learn. And I think that's a good thing. You know, it's super amazing if you get to go to college, but that's just not an option for everyone. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. And the last two I want to leave you with is that if you're worried you're not great, really remind yourself that writing is a skill that takes practice, and you are always going to be improving your craft. It's just like any other craft. You know, the more you show up, the more you practice, the better you get. And one of the best things you can do is get feedback on that writing, whether it's from a qualified editor or somebody else who is very familiar with the type of writing that you're doing. This goes for any kind of writing. So write the thing, like show up and do the work and actually write. That's the best way that you can get better. And the last thing I want to touch on is not having any experience. It is so important to remember that everybody started at zero. Everybody started with no experience. So please don't let that be the thing that stops you. Please. Everyone had to start from the beginning in every single endeavor. So really push back on this belief because it's something that at the end of the day, when you examine it, when you bring it out into the light, doesn't really make any sense. And there's lots of ways that you can get practice copywriting. You don't even need a client to practice copywriting. You can actually study, read, and practice on your own. But make sure you get that feedback because that's really what's going to make you better. And then I want to wrap up with what I started with. With these beliefs that I have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I teach copywriting. Sure, they're beliefs that have come about after years and years, almost a decade of copywriting and working with other copywriters. I'm insanely passionate about it. But ultimately, this YouTube channel exists and is something I commit to showing up and putting a video out each week because I'm so insanely passionate about people breaking outside of the 9-to-5 and finding an entrepreneurial life that works for them. My skill set just happens to be copywriting. If it were painting or ceramics or knitting, I'm pretty sure I would still be creating YouTube videos to help people figure out how to make that passion into a business, because I believe entrepreneurship is so much more accessible than it ever has been before, and it's so important for people to realize that because we're still living presently with so many old school beliefs. So whether or not you come through my program, whether or not you ever interact with me in the online space, I'm thrilled to show up here and talk about this stuff because it's just so important to me that you realize there are more opportunities available to you than existed even 5, 10, 15 years ago. You just have to open your eyes and look at this incredible online space. Poke around on YouTube. There's so many different ways that you can literally create the life of your dreams. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So keep exploring, keep finding the thing that is gonna light you up, make you excited about working every day, and ultimately have you earning the money that you want to earn so that you can care for your family and break out of the survival cycle and move into a life where you're thriving. Because honestly, that is going to put you in a position where you're going to be able to turn around and help someone else. And it is so important. Okay, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I was feeling really passionate about this, which is why I wanted to make this video for you today. Anyway, I hope that helps. I can get really fired up. As you can tell, this means a lot to me. And so thank you for being here. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up button if you like it. Leave me some comments. I'm sure I'm going to hear from the people who have degrees that didn't like hearing this, but really just think about your fellow human, because it's not just about your degree. I mean, I have a degree that I think was an absolute waste. So I'm right there with you. And yeah, it's about all of us collectively at the end of the day. So love you guys. Thanks for being here. Bye.